Hello, hello, EVE Online fans and Resurrected Starships fans. Those of you who are players of EVE Online will appreciate this video quite a bit. Those of you who are not, but interested in starships, may still appreciate this video, but I will be covering some things that are pretty familiar to EVE Online players. It may not be familiar to others at all, so bear with me. Now, the reality of EVE Online is this. EVE Online is probably the most complicated game in existence. Now, there are promises that Star Citizen may be just as complicated and rich, but it hasn't had years and years to grow and develop and change with iterative updates. EVE has. EVE still has 10,000 systems, or no, not 10,000, but well over 5,000 star systems and territories to live in and explore and find content, and most of that content is player generated. And also, there is a lot of PvP in EVE Online. The EVE Online PvP, which is all ship-to-ship PvP for them, well, not all of it. Some of it is on the market and some of it is in other areas of the game. But the ship-to-ship PvP is probably every bit as complex and interesting as something like StarCraft or League of Legends or something like that. It is not interesting to people who are interested in mainly first-person shooters or a lot of spectacles, etc. Because the reality is, when you're doing PvP against other ships in EVE, you're zoomed out to about here most of the time, or at least you should be. Or you're focused on what's going over here on this little spreadsheet, which is the overview, which gives you all kinds of information about different objects in space. For that reason, even to someone who's an avid player of EVE like myself, I find it less interesting to watch PvP than to play. Now, some people love to watch other people stream the game. Some people are avid followers of other YouTubers on EVE. But in my opinion, watching people play is not nearly as interesting as just playing. Now, if they explained and illustrated what the hell is going on during the battle more often, then yes, I would watch that. So that is what I intend to do. I am going to I'm going to break down 4 battles I had with this Galente frigate, the Comet. And I am going to use a little bit of CG animation to illustrate what's going on, the moves I made, the moves I missed. I'm also going to shamelessly show my mistakes. I'm not going to pretend to be this awesome, badass PvPer that never makes a mistake, because believe me, in these 4 recordings, even so, I'm a little rusty and I make plenty of mistakes. PvP in EVE Online is something that can never be totally mastered by anybody, because there are a million types of PvP in EVE. This is frigate PvP, the smallest ship. A swarm of frigates can take down battleships, but some people are better in battleships. Some people are better at covert ops ships. Some people are better in super capitals or capitals like Titans and Dreadnoughts, which I certainly know very little about. And others are just great at ganking innocent miners and haulers in high security space. And I'm somewhat familiar with that, but not a specialist. But we are in an area of low sec, where pirates are made, like myself, called faction warfare space, where the big empires, in this case the Galente Federation and the Caldari, fight over an area of low sec for control, and they employ other players to fight. Now, I myself am not enrolled in faction warfare. Our corporation may enroll in faction warfare later, but we just simply hunt out here in this area because of the fighting content that we can find, and we can fight in the faction warfare complexes that these factions are fighting over. And this provides a lot of good content, because sometimes when you find these faction warfare complexes, like for example this Galente small stronghold, only certain ships can enter that complex. So you're not going to get immediately overpowered by something like a heavy assault frigate, because they cannot get into some of these complexes, or a Galente novice outpost. Now, why is PvP exciting in EVE? Well, there are 2 big things at stake. One, your interstellar credits, which is your in-game money, It costs money to build these ships and to fit them out, and also your reputation as a player, especially me as a CEO of a PvP corporation. Although CEOs can get away with never PvPing themselves, I don't think I can. Of course, it doesn't matter as much to my corp mates as it matters to me, but I feel much more confident when I go out and I solo PvP and I actually kill a thing or two. That makes me feel more like the alpha stud that I really am. Going over to this fit here. This is what is called a scram-kite fit, meaning it's meant to engage at warp scramble range. In this case, my warp scrambler, which shuts down the enemy ship's both micro warp drive and warp drive so they cannot escape, is within 8,250 meters. I can extend that by overheating it to about 9.9K, right? This is the range that I want to engage in because I'm also armed with 150 millimeter railguns, which have an optimal within 9,000 meters, which is just within my scram range, and a fall off of 16 kilometers, meaning that anything out of 16 kilometers I'm going to start to miss. It also doesn't have the best tracking for actually hitting the target. The turret tracking of this particular railgun with this particular ammo loaded is 126 rads per second, 126.33 rads per second. That is about half of a smaller weapon like a blaster or an autocannon, which have really good tracking. But it has much better much better range and projection than an autocannon or a blaster, which means if I can engage somewhere outside of 5,000 clicks, or around 7,500 clicks is generally where I like to engage with this, I have a great advantage because their fall off is going to be much shorter. They're not going to be able to hit me while I can hit them. I also have 2 flights of 3 Acolyte 2 light combat drones, which will follow a target no matter what range it's at, with control range out to 50 something kilometers, 57 kilometers. They will follow the target as long as they can catch it, which they will catch most things short of an interceptor or something like a really fast Garmer. They will catch it and they will apply damage. They will apply EM damage. They are not the most powerful drone. They're kind of middle of the road. A compromise between speed and DPS, right? The nice thing about a scram-kite ship like this, the Comet is not the only thing that can scram-kite. Republic Fleet Firetails can scram-kite. Rifters can scram-kite. A lot of missile ships like the Kestrel can rocket-kite. So the nice thing about a scram-kite ship is that it allows you to engage at close range, but it also allows you the ability to get out of the fight if it goes badly. And you will see in one of these 4 fights I've recorded that one of the fights did not go that well, but because I was engaging at a comfortable range, keeping the stasis web of fire on them as well to reduce their velocity by 55%, I was able to escape unscathed and keep my 20 million ISK that I invested into this ship. Now this is fairly cheap. I'm not spending any bling on this ship, as you can see. This is slightly hull tanked. It's got a little bit of damage mods here. It's got a ancillary armor repairer. Oh, I have to mention, this armor repairer uses nanite paste to repair the most amount. It will use the nanite paste until it runs out of nanite paste. When it runs out of nanite paste, one of 2 things will happen. It'll try to reload, if you have auto reload on, or it will go on repairing without nanite paste, just not as strong. If it reloads, it will stop repairing for about a minute, and it will give you no active tank at all, which is very bad news, which is why it's very important if you're using an ancillary armor repper and also ancillary shield booster to set auto reload off. Not on, but off. Alright. Also, I have in the rig slots some transverse bulkheads, which means I'm essentially hull tanked, not armor tanked, not shield tanked. You don't want to mix your tanks too much. Even though I have an active armor repairer, I am hull tanked, because most of this ship's natural hit points is actually in the hull, not in the armor or the shields. For this particular ship, other ships are more better as shield tankers, and others are more better as armor tankers, and still others work best as speed tankers so that nothing will hit them at all, such as an interceptor. Okay, enough yapping. I've yapped for too long. Let's get into the battles. Now, the first fight we will get into is a Rifter versus a Comet. Like I said before, Rifters are capable of scram-kiting as well, but I was able to descan this Rifter down in a novice site in faction warfare space, and a kill's a kill. Even though I have the more superior ship, I thought I would go for it. However, I was a little bit suspicious that this Rifter might actually be baiting me for a larger gang, and because of my anxiousness, you will see that I made a few mistakes. Begin. I begin the fight by activating the acceleration gate into the complex. I see the Rifter is on descan at 1 AU. However, I am wary and nervous. Obviously, the first thing I want to do is try to get a warp scrambler on him so he cannot escape. I fully expected him to warp out after seeing this pirate come into a comet. He did not warp out. He engaged, as you can see here. He has engaged me. Alright, the first thing I did, pause. The first thing I did, you can see that I clicked the railgun activation button, but nothing happened, and I did not notice. And let's continue. So the fight goes on a while. I get my acolytes engaging him. I am scrammed and webbed. He is scrammed and webbed. I'm keeping it about 7,000 clicks, which is good. But I still haven't engaged my railguns, and my armor is going down kind of fast. I activate the ancillary armor repper, and finally I notice, I need to turn on my railguns. Now, pause. Here's another mistake I made. You see the blue circle around the ship. In this case, I have decided to orbit, so I forgot that what I want to do is reduce the transversal of my railguns so that they will hit. But my railguns are still hitting. You can see here 152 to Ninja Cardinal. The railguns are still hitting. The reason I'm kind of rusty here is because I'm still very suspicious, and I'm worried that his buddies are going to show up. After all, it is a slightly inferior ship that I'm fighting. Okay, continue. So I finally get the railguns on him, and I continue the fight. I have overloaded my warp scrambler. Now I'm into hull, but I'm still holding because I have some structure tank. Now at this point, I have decided to reduce my transversal, and I'm keeping at range instead of orbiting. He is orbiting, but I am running keep at range. And he is not hitting me that hard at this point. Now finally, the superiority of my ship shows, and he gets blown up, and I put good fights in local. And he goes. And pause. Alright, so a couple of things, a couple of mistakes that I made. Obviously, I'm rusty, so rusty that I did not engage my railguns quickly enough. Had this been a ship of equal strength, I would have died. Also, this appeared to be a relatively new player, but he did not fight like a new player. Also, judging by the kill, he had 200mm autocannons, which means he was also fit for scram-kite. You'll notice that he never did try to come in on me. He stayed at his optimal as well. He was trying to scram-kite me as well. Comets can be armed with blasters as often as they are armed with railguns, so it's possible that he thought that he could kill me by keeping a scram-kite range, but I was scram-kite fit as well. Now this guy did inject a skill injector so that he could get his skills up, and obviously he is playing with an alt character. Otherwise, if he were as new as he appeared to be, he would have died much quicker. So that ends the first battle. The next battle was much more evenly matched. I had to fight an Ishkar, which is a drone boat assault frigate from hell. In this case, I was curious to see what would happen. Most people don't fly Ishkars as much as they fly more popular things like Jaguars or Inyos. I figure I am in a scram-kite ship. I can try to get out if it goes badly. So I decided to go ahead and take the fight, and let's see what happens. Begin. I lock him up. I do a keep at range of 7,500 rather than an orbit, so obviously I've learned a few things. And I have a little bit of lag here. And also, let's pause. Alright, right here you can see that I made a mistake. I only drug one Acolyte 2 out into space when I meant to drag them all. The problem here is that I did not have drone folders set up. I also don't have full loadout of Acolytes. I'm supposed to have 6. Obviously some went missing somewhere. So that's another mistake. Now he immediately puts a newt, or a NOS, and a warp scrambler on me, but no stasis web of fire, which isn't going to do any good because I still have an afterburner. Okay, continue. Now after a little bit of lag, I see I've got a drone problem, so I get all the drones out into space and get them engaged. Engage the afterburner so I can control range. I like my range right here. Alright, now he is not hitting me hard at all. Clearly, you know, I have a better position than he does. He's trying to close. Now here's another problem. Pause. Something has happened in my overview. What I am not showing here, normally I have this expanded out further so that I can see the velocity in the transversal. And for whatever reason, I narrowed it so that I cannot see those columns, so I cannot judge whether he is able to overtake me and kill me or not. But clearly he is also using blasters. You can see here light ion blaster 2s. He's not hitting me very hard because he probably his optimal is probably somewhere within 5 clicks, not the 6,000 clicks that the over 6,000 clicks he's at right now. Okay, let's continue the battle. So the battle goes. I am fighting what I believe to be a superior ship. This thing does have an assault damage control, or it should. As you can see, my tank is struggling to keep up. I'm trying to manage heat damage. I'm trying to manage lot. At this point I decide, you know, maybe this engagement isn't such a good idea. Maybe I ought to consider getting out, so I start looking for things I can warp out to. And I see another output, another faction warfare outpost over there, and I align, and I am and just as my afterburner burns out from heat, I manage to extract from this battle, and good fights in local. So, pause. In this case, I believe I was doing much more damage than I should have been able to do. It is very possible that he did not have the assault damage control module on at all. He may have been hull tank 2 and he was just waiting for me to get close enough so that he could grab me and lock me down and hit me with blasters. But I was wary of that, and I decided to stay at the edge of scram-kite range so that I could get out, and I managed to get out. The next fight is with the Galente attack frigate called the Atron. Again, a Tech 1 frigate. Again, a fight that should be in every way to my advantage. For some reason or another, perhaps mistakes were made. This individual decided to let me catch them and let me fight them. Atrons can put out a lot of DPS. They're extremely fast. Also, if they're able to get an orbit on me, they may be able to prevent a lot of damage from being applied to them by getting under my guns, so to speak, and not allowing the railguns to track. However, in this case, I believe the Acolytes alone were enough damage to kill this Comet, as you will see, and here is the battle now. Now, while my buddy Peepo babbles, I see that there's an Atron in this faction warfare complex, and I go in for the attack. I fully expect him to try to go ahead and warp out as soon as he sees the pirate and the Comet, but perhaps the psychological threat of a pirate is too high, and he makes a mistake and allows me to tackle him. Again, I do not have my velocity column showing, which is too bad, but you can see he gets close. You can see he gets really close, which is exactly where he wants to be, and he's hitting me pretty hard, to be fair. He's got a little bit of a newt. But I decide to go ahead and get it in my optimal, and I managed to do that without a problem. Web and scram is all it takes, and he dies quickly when the transversal is cut to nearly 0. So in this case, I believe that reducing the transversal to a very low amount, the Atron is not a very tanky ship. It survives by being fast and being unhittable. In this case, it wasn't a good match. In this case, I find that there is a Dremiel lurking in the faction warfare site, as I can see it in my D-scan. Dremiel versus Comet is pretty close. However, I happen to know that a Comet, at least at scram-kite, is one of the strongest ships that you can have. A Dremiel can kite, or it can scram-kite, and maybe it can brawl to some extent. It has drones in the same way that my ship has. I decide I'm going to go ahead and take the fight, and here we go. I activate the gate. I go on in. Now I have history with this guy. He once humiliated me with a Talos in front of my entire corp. So luckily, JJ Gunslinger is here, and I have a chance to return that favor. I lock him up, I scram him, I web him, get all my modules on, and he immediately starts moving out to 12 clicks. My biggest fear here... Pause. My biggest fear here is that he is going to be able to pull range and get way outside my optimal and put a warp disruptor on me and use his micro warp drive to kite me out and kill me while there is absolutely nothing I can do about it. Now again, I've made the mistake of not having the velocity showing here. It's possible he may even be able to control the range with his speed. At this point, I'm not paying too much attention to what's going on as far as what weapons he has, but you can see by the readout here, it's auto cannons, which have okay range compared to railguns, but not as good. So we know that once he gets out of a certain range, his fall off will cause him to start missing. Okay, resume. But luckily he does not go to kite. He comes back right where I need him to be. Right at about 8 clicks, right in scram range. I get the scram back on him, and the fight ensues. I'm trying to be very careful also of managing my heat. I have modules on overheat so that I can keep him scrammed. Remember, without overheat, my scram is only at 8,250. And I'm engaging, and his drones are engaging me. We both have a similar amount of drones. Now, at this point, he comes in, and he dies, right?
Nice.
So in this case, I was able to return a little bit of revenge there, even though he tore me apart in my Vexor in front of the whole corp a long time ago. He probably doesn't even remember. I was able to return the favor and kill him. And I was able to kill what shows on Zkill to be about 80 mil worth of stuff. So at this point, there are a few mistakes I want to point out that I've made here. Obviously, there was the problem with the velocity and transversal not showing on the overview. Those are really important when deciding whether you can be caught or whether you can catch someone else. Transversal determines whether you're going to be able to hit them. Very important if you're using something like artillery turrets or railguns. And the other thing is that I have a little bit too much of a reliance on manual clicking. Now, to be fair, the navigation controls don't respond to hotkeys very well in EVE, but the modules do. So things like F1, which is a terrible hotkey, I changed my fire primary weapon to just the number 1 key. But activating modules such as the micro warp drive, the scrambler, and the weapons should be hotkeys, because what that's going to allow me to do is focus more on the positioning in space and perhaps some manual piloting, so I'm not having to constantly go back down and click down. my reaction time can be increased. Okay, that concludes it for this particular ship. My next battle breakdowns will be with the Amar destroyer called the Dragoon. Also, I have decided to fully open the doors to recruitment. If anyone is interested in hanging out with us, doing a little bit of small gang PvP with some solo support, and wants to roam on a regular basis in LoSec, feel free to hit up Maximillian Bonaparte in-game and/or go to look up Interstellar Booty Hunters and hang out in the Booty Tiki Bar until one of us sort of interviews you. We do have a skill point requirement, but it's not too high, and we kind of prefer you be Omega instead of Alpha. So that concludes it for this video. Thanks for watching, Space Friends, and peace out.